Suicide is painless. Here's a bit of trivia. When Suicide Squad came out in 2016, it got some extra notoriety, not just because a lot of critics thought it sucked, but because someone actually created a change.org petition to shut down the website Rotten Tomatoes. Specifically because they didn't like that Rotten Tomatoes gave Suicide Squad a bad aggregate score. And over 22,000 people signed that petition. And I just want to say, what a lame movie to create a call to action for. Like, it's bad enough to want to shut down anyone's opinion over a movie, but to do it for Suicide Squad. Ugh, what a waste of time. Also, if you watch the credits, you may spot a familiar name if you're politically savvy. This movie, and Batman vs. Superman, interestingly enough, were partly funded by a Goldman Sachs executive named Steven Mnuchin, who, interestingly enough, was appointed as Donald Trump's Treasury Secretary only a few months after this film came out. And there's something poetic about that, because this film tries very, very hard to paint itself as being nonconformist and rebellious and punk, and yet at the end of the day, the most notable thing it did was help propel a Goldman Sachs banker to become the most powerful financial figure in the country, wherein his signature was literally printed on every new dollar bill in America. In other words, the opposite of counterculture. But, you know, back to the movie. Suicide Squad is terrible, and it's terrible in many of the ways that Batman vs. Superman was terrible. It has crappy dialogue, and if I can go off for a second, it is inexcusable for any movie to have a budget as bloated as this one does and not have good writing, when there are a million excellent writers out there who are desperate to get in the industry and who would leap at the chance to doctor a script like this for peanuts. I'm tired of watching movies like this that put so much attention into making the CGI look realistic, and yet they allow their characters to give off the weakest, cheesiest, shittiest dialogue you've ever heard that no one would use in real life. What else does it have? It has over-stylized slow-mo shots, which absolutely is a Zack Snyder staple at this point. It has laughably goofy flashbacks. It even has Batman show up in it for a few minutes. Most notably, though, it too feels like it was made not because someone wrote a cool script for a Suicide Squad movie, but because some executive at Warner Brothers wanted a Suicide Squad movie and no one had come up with a good script for one yet, and that executive was like, whatever, we'll figure that part out later, just start making it. Seriously, it doesn't matter. These DC fanboys will eat anything we serve to them. Hell, they'll even petition to shut down websites that we partially own just to defend the worst bullshit that we could possibly release to the general public. And you know what? That hypothetical executive would have been right, because this film grossed almost $750 million worldwide. Suicide Squad might be crap, but it's commercially successful crap. Anyway, here's the synopsis for the film. A government official named Amanda Waller, who was played by Viola Davis, and who, for what it's worth, did a really good job in the role, decides to assemble a task force comprised of DC supervillains to help her with, something. Villains such as Deadshot, played by Will Smith, Harley Quinn, played by Margot Robbie, Captain Boomerang, Diablo, and Killer Croc, who was played by Adewale Akinwumi Agbaje, weirdly enough. But almost immediately after she pitches what would eventually become the Suicide Squad, one of the meta-humans she recruited, named Enchantress, goes on a killing spree, and so the rest of the squad spends the whole movie trying to stop her, which only makes the film's premise feel kinda pointless. Seriously, I don't know why anyone would ever listen to Amanda Waller ever again on anything when her scheme to recruit the most evil people in the world to fight for her was dumb and nearly killed everyone, and the only thing the Suicide Squad accomplished in the end was negating the actions of someone who she recruited as part of her incredibly stupid idea. Beyond that, though, there's a huge conceptual problem with this film that's never quite resolved, and that is, if you're going to make a movie where the protagonists of the film are the quote-unquote bad guys, those bad guys have to be likable. There has to be a reason for the audience to give a shit about any of them when they get into conflict. but the only villain who's given any depth is Deadshot, which isn't to say that it's good depth, because again, the dialogue sucks and the story sucks, but he's the only guy with an arc that you can kind of connect with. And that's probably only because the execs were thrilled to get Will Smith in this movie and were like, just give him the most screen time. Every other anti-hero is totally unlikable. They're all mass murderers, and they display no real interest in redeeming themselves. They're actively retaliating against their guards and plotting a mutiny all throughout the movie. And so, unless you come into Suicide Squad as a giant fan of Captain Boomerang or Killer Croc, there's no incentive for you to care about any of them. Also, it doesn't even make sense why the squad members take the path they take in the end, because they all team up against Enchantress before it's all said and done. There's like a power of friendship aspect that gets thrown at us in the closing moments, and it doesn't feel earned. These dudes could easily have decided to just destroy the world at the end of the film instead of saving it, and it wouldn't have been inconsistent with their characters. There are other parts of Suicide Squad that I found totally out of sync. The soundtrack, for one, is cringeworthy. Think of every band or song that you've ever heard in any movie or commercial or music game ever, because they're all in this film. It's AC/DC, it's Fortunate Son by Creedence Clearwater Revival, it's Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen, it's Black Sabbath, it's the Rolling Stones, it's Seven Nation Army by the White Stripes, it's Without Me by Eminem. It's just an unrelenting 2 hours of music that's so generic that it hinders the film instead of augmenting it, because it forces you to recall other stuff that you've already heard this music in. However, the most annoying part of this film is that it's desperate for you to bask in how twisted or sinister or sick these villains are, when in actuality, they're all just lame caricatures of what a bad person looks like. The cast of Suicide Squad represents an old, rich white dude's idea of what constitutes edginess, because there's nothing edgy about them other than that they have tattoos or different skin. Like, the Joker is in the film, played by Jared Leto, and the Joker has a tattoo that says damaged on his forehead, and Harley Quinn has a tattoo that says rotten, and she wears shirts that say burn after use, and she says that she likes to have sex. Ooh. And Deadshot has a gun that says love and hate on it, and he has a Bible verse on his collar. And maybe those attributes would be interesting if this was a workplace comedy set in real life, but it's not. This film takes place in a cinematic universe where we're desensitized to seeing weird shit, where we don't even flinch when we see a dude walking around in a bat outfit. So, whoop-de-doo that someone has grills and the word damage written on their head. But the movie keeps dwelling on these guys' appearance as though it's proud of this, as though we're supposed to be shocked and go, my God, that person has a tattoo of a mouth on their hand and tattoos on their face. They're breaking all the rules of society. How can any movie possibly display this? When in reality, it's not that big a deal. Like, simply having someone look eccentric does not an interesting character make if their modus operandi and personalities aren't complex and fascinating too, and they're not here. Killer Croc is one-dimensional. Captain Boomerang is one-dimensional. Harley Quinn, save a dumb plot twist at the end, is one-dimensional. And compared to that, the fact that some of them wear makeup or swear is tame more than anything. Also, the film tries to graft a moral near the end that, like, these villains are the way they are because they've been ostracized by society, and that we should feel sympathy towards them. All throughout the film, the squad members are saying stuff like, remember, we're the bad guys because the man said so. But these dudes weren't put in prison because the fashion police thought they were weird. They were put in prison because they all killed people, because they're murderers. And with the exception of Diablo, none of them are repentant about that. The film tries to escape the fact that we're watching unlikable people, but it also can't stop to revel in how demented they are, and how they're still villains, and it muddies any substance that anyone could have gotten out of this thing beyond the joy that you might get from seeing some famous supervillains work together. So, All in all, Suicide Squad is not great. For all its decorations, the film is very cookie-cutter and generic. You can predict where the film is going a few scenes in advance. And it's way too slow. It takes 40 minutes for the Suicide Squad to actually be assembled. And for a film that exists primarily so that you can watch supervillains team up, that's a long 40 minutes. The plot is so bare and uninteresting that the most heights it reaches is that occasionally you get to see amorphous CGI monsters get smashed and shot to death. And that's about it. Beneath the surface of these outlandish looking characters and this convoluted setup is a really, really dull by-the-numbers story. So dull, in fact, that I'm recording this review only a couple days after I've seen it, and I swear, as of the sentence that I'm speaking, right now, at this moment, I have already forgotten like half this movie. That being said, it's not Batman vs. Superman. Suicide Squad is bad. It's a movie that dwells more on aesthetics than depth. But it's not Batman vs. Superman. Batman vs. Superman is like Super Saiyan God level bad. Sure, in a short amount of time, I will forget virtually everything about Suicide Squad, but that's only because there weren't any searingly awful scenes in it like there are in the Superman movie, where a real-life newscaster was brought in so that the film could give itself permission to have Superman destroy nearby buildings. I see Batman vs. Superman as a film that people are going to go out of their way to watch years from now, specifically so that they can revel in how horrible it is, like people do with Troll 2, or Plan 9 from Outer Space, or the George Clooney Batman movie. Suicide Squad, on the other hand, is just mediocre enough that it doesn't reach that level of infamy. It's probably not good enough that you'll enjoy it, but it's also not so horrible that its badness will stick with you years and years after the fact. It might be crap, but it's forgettable crap. And for that reason, I can comfortably project, with 99% of all precincts reporting, that Suicide Squad, in my opinion, is a better movie than Batman vs. Superman, which is perhaps the most meager compliment ever said about anything ever, but so be it.